Hello everyone, I'm That Embroidery Girl and welcome to another embroidery tutorial, and this time it's let's make floral embroidery, and this is what you're going to be making today. First you're going to need a water soluble pen, hoop up some fabric, this is a linen mix, and draw these lines roughly around 6 centimeters apart. Make the first one quite small and narrow, and then the second one longer, and then the subsequent ones just slightly lower down, probably around about 1/2 centimeter or so, and they're getting slowly narrower as they go towards that bottom line. You'll also need to add a final line under the first like this. Next you'll need to pick out some floss. I've gone for a light, a medium and a dark green, but you could alternatively use brown. I just think that green for the colours we're going to use for the flowers looks a lot better. And you'll need a chenille needle. This is one with a very sort of fine body and a nice big eye. So we're going to start at the very edge of the first line that we drew and go up to the top line here, again at the very edge, and you're just going to stitch straight down, and I'm using here the lightest green. It's quite important to remember that it's the lightest green because we want to create like a sense of depth. So we'll use the lightest green when we start, and we're going to add these straight stitches exactly like so, from one corner to the other and then from one corner to the other. You're now going to do the same thing again, coming slightly more in. So you'll notice that the angle changes. You want maybe around about 3 or 4 millimeters separate at the top. They'll be much closer together at the bottom. And repeat that again. And we're going to do this one more time, and you'll notice that these stitches are almost straight now. You're now going to grab your second darkest colour and start on the line just underneath. You're going to come up from there to the second line that you drew down, and again you're going to come on the outermost corners, and you're going to repeat this sequence from one side to the other exactly like you can see me stitching. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more lines in, and these ones again will be pretty much straight, and they will again be hitting that second line down. The idea is that as you're stitching, all of these threads end up sort of bunched in the very centre so that we can turn them into a bunch of flowers. I'm just going to put a little back stitch in here just to secure, and I will cut the thread off. So the last thread's going in now, and this is the darkest thread that I have. And I'm just going to line that up with my third line that I drew. And again, I'm going to go in at an angle. You can see that as we're going down, the angle's getting less and less, and that's because we're trying to draw our eye obviously to the center part of this little drawing. I don't have any distance anymore on the bottom, but I have gone down 1 here just to add a little bit more of a sense of depth. So for this project I'm going to be using some of my vintage Coats crochet thread. You can pretty much find this still anywhere else, it just probably won't be Coats that make it. It might be Anchor or somewhere like that. It's really nice, and this is a 20. So I've used this double on my needle. You can see both strands there with a knot at the end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing some French knots. Now I want these to be really chunky, so I'm actually going to wrap my thread around 3 or 4 times, pull those wraps down, and then pull the needle back through, and you can see that makes a really nice chunky French knot. I'm going to go ahead and do that again, and bear in mind whatever we do on one side we'll do to the other so that we can keep this bouquet fairly even and looking quite symmetrical. So I'm going to add 4 little buds here, lots of wraps around the needle, bring those wraps down to the fabric, pull the needle through. Try not to get a knot in it, which happens sometimes, and pull it down tight. A final one, and then I will jump over to the other side to do this again. So I've gone ahead and filled in the other side, and now I'm just doing the middle, again keeping these French knots nice and chunky, and the variegated thread just gives it a really pretty finish. I'm now going to take another vintage coat thread. This is from a charity shop in the UK, but you can find something on eBay. And I'm going to repeat the process, but with this thread. Lots of nice chunky French knots, remembering what I do to one side, I'm going to do to the other. So I'm going to add 2 more French knots to this area, and then I'm going to repeat on the opposite side. And I'm then going to fill out the bottom line that you can see here with some more chunky French knots. Again, keeping to that rule, what I do to one side, I'm going to repeat on the other. Once I've done that, I'm going to add another vintage crochet thread on my needle, and this is a nice variegated blue. And again, I'm going to go ahead and carry on adding some chunky French knots. Now what I'm starting to do really is fill up space, but I really want to keep all of the area symmetrical. So again, I'm going to do one side and then the other, and in the middle I can kind of ad hoc it and see how it starts to look. I am, it's worth noting, keeping all of this double stranded, meaning that there is 2 strands on my needle with a knot at the very bottom. So once I've done that, I'm going to take an Anchor Pearly 5 in magenta, and I'm going to actually start some cast on stitches just to add some thickness into the bouquet. So I'm going to come up with my needle. I've got 2 strands on my needle, again with a knot at the bottom. Come down some distance away. The stitch is roughly around about 5mm or so long. Come up again, pull that back thread nice and tight and pull the needle up slightly, and just add some loops over the top of the needle. Don't pull these loops super tight, as the needle and the thread that's on it will find it difficult to come up again. And you're going to add 4 or 5 little cast on stitches on there and pull through. Just arrange it slightly because it will have a tendency to tuck under. Manipulate it into place and then stitch down. And you're going to repeat this process. I'll show you in the areas where I've added them. So you're going to add one directly opposite, almost to look sort of almost like an orchid or something, because we're going to add a nice yellow French knot in there soon. One either side, and if you're not sure how to do a cast on stitch, I've left the footage in here again just to show you at a different angle. I've come up and then I'm just literally creating little loops that I pull down. I'm not pulling them tight, because if I pull them tight my needle won't go through the little loops. So just 4 of those and pull. The perle thread's particularly nice to do cast on stitches with because it just sort of slips through, whereas sometimes the anchor and the embroidery floss can sort of snag because it's cotton. So perle is really good to do cast on stitches in. So I'm next going to use an Anchor embroidery floss in deep yellow, and I'm going to use the full strand, and I'm going to use the full strand on the needle doubled over, so there's a knot at the base of this thread. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill in my areas with some nice deep yellow French knots. Now it's quite nice to use this thread because it has a little bit of a different texture to the crochet cotton. And once I've done that, I'm going to use some white crochet cotton in 20, and I'm just now going to finish off filling in the areas with some white crochet cotton. Again, this is doubled over, one knot at the base, and I'm just going to fill in all the areas, remembering that what I do to one side I'm going to do to the other. And once I've finished that, I'm going to get some polyester ribbon. This is a 3mm in red, and I'm going to take my chenille needle and just gently place it underneath all of those stems that we created. Make sure that it doesn't catch any of the thread there. Take my needle off the ribbon and I'm going to tie it up. where it's the most narrow. And I had a little bit of trouble with this because I'm left-handed, so the right-handed people are well in front of us doing a little bow. I actually had to do this upside down, so if you're left-handed, just go ahead and do that upside down. Arrange it to your preference. You could leave it long if you want to, but I'm actually going to cut this off now. And this is it, the finished bouquet. If you like this video, please do subscribe, comment and follow me on Instagram.